So 6 Israeli hostages were just murdered by Hamas. What's sad about these murders is they probably could have actually been prevented, but unfortunately, I've come to the conclusion that both sides don't want peace. And the reason they were executed by the militants of Hamas is because of the military pressure Israel's been putting on Hamas, and their captors have orders from Hamas saying that if these hostages are going to be freed through military means, they have orders to kill them, which is a war crime, let alone taking hostages in the first place. And the reason people are pissed in Israel right now is because the Israeli government does not want to negotiate with Hamas. I would have a lot more respect for the Israeli government if they came out and said, we have no interest in negotiating with Hamas. We're here to destroy Hamas. And don't do this doublespeak saying our primary concern is the hostages. It's not. And these recent ceasefire negotiations fell through, it's because Israel wants to have control of something called the Philadelphia Corridor, which is where Egypt has been allowing Hamas to actually get weapons through there. I can understand why Israel will want control of that corridor because they don't want to deal with a war years from now when Hamas is reconstituted and actually poses a military threat to them. However, the political leadership in Israel is sticking their thumbs in the eye of the defense minister, Gallant, who has said plain as day, I do not want Israeli troops occupying Gaza because it's a hornet's nest. That's why they left back in 2005, and they don't want to risk their own soldiers. And the defense minister, Gallant, has vehemently come out publicly and said Bibi has been a roadblock to getting a hostage deal, which I understand because Gallant's primary objective is the safety and security of the Israeli people. So of course he's going to do everything possible to try to get the people who are being held hostage by Hamas out of Gaza. However, if Israel can get control of the Philadelphia corridor, that effectively would end Palestinian armed resistance. And I can see why the Israeli government is fed up with the idea of a two-state solution, because they've been offered peace 6 times. And the offers made back in 2000 and 2008 were not bad offers for someone who has no leverage in this negotiation, because the extremists in Palestine, Hamas, do not see Israel as a legitimate state. I could see why the Israelis do not want Hamas to have any political leadership whatsoever. After you've committed a massacre like the October 7th attacks, I wouldn't see you as a legitimate negotiating partner either. However, we have to live in the world that it is, not the one we wish to live in. Follow this analogy with me. We had things like the Nat Turner slave rebellions, where slaves basically went out and killed all white people. If you put people in a boiling pot and you don't let them have control of their own sovereignty, there's always going to be resistance to that. Also, in these recent ceasefire negotiations, neither side wants a permanent ceasefire. Hamas says, we want a ceasefire for 5 years, we'll become a political party, we'll put down our weapons, and we'll see where we're at in 5 years. That's not a permanent ceasefire either. And this reminds me a little bit what happened when President Obama was negotiating with Iran to try to get a nuclear arms treaty. Reporters were putting pressure on him saying that, why aren't you trying to get some of the American citizens who are being held captive by Iran? And he said, do you really want to set the precedent saying, if you take our people hostage, you can get political concessions from the United States? Israel's kind of in the same spot right now. Do you really want to legitimize things like October 7th and all the Palestinians who have died because of this? I think Israel has taken unprecedented actions to try to protect civilians in Gaza, far more than any other country ever did, and they're also using food as a weapon of war, which is illegal under international law. But also, Hamas is willing to sacrifice the children of Gaza in order to get political concessions from Israel. So I understand when Israeli officials are trying to say, we're literally fighting people who are evil, and they don't bend to political pressure like we have to because we're a democracy in the Middle East. We actually have to listen to our people. We don't have to listen to the United States, even though we give them billions of dollars in military aid, but we might actually have to cave to public pressure. Now, I think at this point, if the Americans truly want the Israelis to listen to us, I think we have to put an arms embargo on Israel, saying you're taking the ceasefire deal whether you like it or not. Joe Biden could actually use his leverage in negotiations versus just saying, oh, I can't decree and I can't do anything about it. And I think Israel is confronted with only 2 options. They either had to ethnically cleanse Gaza and push the Palestinians out to another country, or they would have to make the second choice, which is actually getting rid of Hamas, but I think that would take killing too many civilians, and I don't think the world community would be able to stand that. Also, part of the reason this war has been so brutal, number one, you're fighting a terrorist organization that literally doesn't care about its own civilians, but also Israel's trying to restore some sort of deterrence capacity. They're surrounded by other countries who hate them, and then after October 7th, these countries that are proxies of Iran on might get some ideas saying, hey, Israel's not as powerful as we thought they were. Maybe we should try something. And before, the deterrence was based on escalation dominance, meaning that if you do something to me, I'm going to do something a whole lot worse to you. And then after these kids were killed on a playground in Israel, they decided to kill a top Hamas official in Tel Aviv and a top Hezbollah commander. So they're trying to restore some form of escalation dominance, but now there's hundreds of thousands of people in Israel who are protesting Bibi Netanyahu because he's not willing to take a ceasefire proposal. Number one, he has personal ambitions in holding on to power, and number two, he might actually face corruption charges, so he has all the incentive in the world to not take a ceasefire. And also, if he accepts a ceasefire proposal, Ben Gvir and Smotrich will pull out of the government, there would be new elections called, and that would probably be the end of Benjamin Netanyahu. And I think Benjamin Netanyahu needs to go because he's not a partner for peace. The October 7th attacks happened on his watch. This shows the Israelis are a lot smarter than the Americans, because after 9/11 happened, we were like, rah, rah, George Bush. You got an August 6th memo warning that this might happen. The Americans should have turned around and said, no, this is your fault. Over 70% of the population want Bibi to resign. So Bibi has all the incentive in the world to never accept a ceasefire. Unless the United States says, hey, you're not going to take a ceasefire proposal, we'll make you take a ceasefire proposal.